It is my pleasure to introduce you to Councilwoman Brianne Nadeau, who was elected to the Council of the District of Columbia this November of 2014. She has brought perspectives from a career that has spanned from nonprofit to public and private sectors. As a council member, Brianne is committed to strengthening our schools, to supporting our small businesses, and increasing affordable housing and public safety. Thank you. Brianne began her career at Hillel, the Foundation for Jewish Campus Life, where she trained student leaders and activists. And she grew up in Michigan, the oldest of 3 daughters, from a family with a deep commitment to civic and political activism. And having gone to public school from K through 12th grade, Brianne has focused much of her attention on improving the district's public schools. She also, by the way, and I had to include this, is a triathlete and a member of the DC Triathlon Club. So for that reason, amongst many others, please welcome Councilwoman Brianne Nadeau. You're welcome. That's going to figure into this conversation, I promise, because I'm fascinated with triathlons. Okay. And then joining us tonight is also Congresswoman Susan Brooks from the great state of Indiana. And Representative Brooks has spent many years advocating for her community in the state of Indiana. And prior to being elected in 2012, she served as the deputy mayor of Indianapolis. And now she proudly represents Indiana's 5th congressional district in central Indiana. She currently also serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, where almost half of all legislation related to the economy must pass. Previously, she served as a senior vice president and general counsel for Ivy Tech Community College from 2007 to 2012. And Representative Brooks has been a champion on advocating for increasing the number of women in office, and we're so delighted that you're here. Please join us. Excellent. So I'm going to start with a really easy question. You ready?
I'm ready.
Totally ready.
All right. So when you think about and when we hear about having women in power and in office, I focus on that P word. So I thought we would start there. So Congresswoman, what does having power mean to you?
Power to me means that you can affect change. You can be in a position to try to make a difference, whether it's in your neighborhood, whether it's in your school, whether it's in Congress, whether it's on a city council. It is putting yourself in that position to affect change and to solve problems. And I think that is a great way of looking at power. But power is also having the wisdom to realize what you should not do. So it's listening, in my opinion, to how you can make positive change, but also having the wisdom to realize what what paths you shouldn't go down.
Interesting. So to have the discernment.
Yes.
Excellent. Would you answer the same question, please? What does having power mean to you?
So there was a young man in my office yesterday who was asking me about my path, and he said, is it like House of Cards? And I said, no.
Watch that.
Yeah, right. Which is terrifying. Yes, but it's not really like that. Thank God. And I think it's important to think of power as a tool, but not as the goal itself. And I think we see that there are some folks who get into office and they relish that power a little too much. And once you see that in your elected officials, that's definitely a good sign that it's time to get some new ones. I think of power as providing an opportunity to elevate our most vulnerable voices and really to move forward on important goals like the ones we all have when we set out on these jobs. But it's good to feel uncomfortable with power. It's good to know how to utilize it, but it's also good to feel a little uncomfortable when people treat you differently because you have that power, and know who the people are in your world that you can trust, and those are the ones who don't care, who treat you the same exact way they did before you had that power.
You know, the reason I started with power is because I think it's one of the things that women sometimes can feel uncomfortable about. There are euphemisms for women in power and women in powerful positions. And so I think about the reclaiming of that word and a redefining and a discernment around that word. But I also think about a need for us to become more comfortable with what that means in our lives. So when we talk about, if tonight's goal is about how do we inspire more women to think about running for elected office, and how do we inspire women in general and girls to think about being leaders in their life. When we talk about running for office, even if I do that casually with friends, or if I've heard women say this, they think about the fundraising when you're running, they think about the campaigning, and they feel like that might be too much, or they feel overwhelmed by that thought. So I wanted to cut right to the chase, especially, and ask you, Congresswoman, what part of elected leadership, and particularly serving in Congress, is worth it?
It depends on what day you ask me. I have to tell you, we're headed back this evening for a meeting because we don't have a budget yet for the country, and we are working hard to try to get a budget yet to keep government funded for the next year. But I would say that it has been worth it for me each and every day. Truly, I joke about it, but people say, are you having fun? And again, it is kind of like, well, depends on the day, because it is hard work. It's hard work to listen to all of the constituents and all of the different, and again, discern all the different policy decisions you have to make when you run for elected office. But I also think people often, this is actually my first elected office, and I wouldn't suggest that necessarily. My first legislative office, Brianna and I were talking about that. I think it is, and when I say elected office, I mean where I put my name on a ballot for constituents and voters to choose. Sure, I had been an elected student body, representative. I was talking with Christian and some of her friends in school, and it starts often with things like running for student council and running for leadership in a group, whether or not it's Girl Scouts or whether or not it's in any organization, whether in college or high school, and then getting that confidence to go forward. But then when you get to other levels of elected office that require getting your messaging out, well, that requires raising money. And I was used to helping nonprofits raise money. I was never accustomed to asking people to fund my own campaign. And so that took a little bit of practice. And it took someone helping coach me, quite frankly, to ask on my own behalf to raise money for my own campaign. But it wasn't for me. It was for my team and for us getting our message out to the general public to help them realize that they should consider voting for me for office. But that is something that I think a lot of times we're not very comfortable with. But once you kind of get going with it, it actually can become fairly competitive, and you can get into it and you can set goals, just like you do with fundraising for nonprofits and other great causes. And suddenly you can realize, my message and my team, we are a great cause. We're a great cause, just like the other efforts that I've raised money for. It's hard work, but it's absolutely worth it.
Love that. What is worth being a councilwoman? Do you have a story or an anecdote you can share?
Absolutely. Well, of course I do. I do. I was a candidate for 1,139 days. I counted. I added them up. And I ran against a 4-term incumbent, and everyone told me I would never win. And it was ugly, and he was mean, and he accused me of fraud, and there were all kinds of crazy things that happened. And on election day, I beat him by 18 points, and it was the coolest thing. And so I go about this job very grateful that I have the opportunity to do it, but also knowing how hard I worked to get here. And so I don't take either of those things for granted. But, when you talk about making sacrifices for the jobs that we do, women make sacrifices every day, whether they're elected or not. And I think one of the things that we as elected women talk about with others that we're encouraging to run, and by the way, you should all run. I said it once. We have to say it how many times tonight,
it's
right?
Like, it's not like a drinking game exactly, but it's sort of like that. It's a fundraising game tonight.
Right. It's a live stream. What we have to do is demonstrate that the sacrifices you're already making in your life are the same ones that you would make in this job, right? And that you already know how to do this, and in some cases you already are. So for me, what makes it worth it every day is the satisfaction that I gain from accomplishing the things that I set out to do, because I now have this power, because I now have this role. For me, getting things done is very satisfying, but being able to get things done that impact people's lives on a larger larger scale is the most satisfying thing I've ever had the opportunity to do in all my 35 years. We'll make a young person joke, right? In all my 35 years. But it's every day I find such satisfaction in that, and that's what makes it worth it.
We're coming into 2016. We have 2 women running for president. What do you think next year's election cycle will be like for women and girls in their view of politics? What do you think could change, both negatively and positively? Hopefully we focus more on the positive. But what does next year look like for the way women and girls view politics?
Well, I think it's terrific that we have women running for the highest office, not just in our land, but we really are the most powerful country in the world. And it's about time that we have women who put themselves on the ballot. We've had, other women. I think of Geraldine Ferraro. You think of other women, Sarah Palin. There are other women who have been, at that almost level. But I think it's incredible that we do have women that have, incredible experiences. They come to these offices very prepared and believing, and their supporters believe they are very prepared to lead the nation. But I think I hope that it will cause a lot of other women to think about, we need more women governors. Right now, we only have 5 women who are governors of our 50 states. We need more women legislators, state legislators. We only have about 25% of our state legislators are women. We're only at about 19% of the House of Representatives are women, and about 20% of the Senate are women. And so we need to do better all across the board. And so what I see all of us, whether we're running for president, whether we're running for House or city council or mayors or governors, we're role models. We're role models for young girls like Christian, for a little girl. When I first came into office, I met with a young girl in my first term in 2013, and she was in 5th grade, and she came to interview me because she was doing a project on me. Well, that's really humbling when you realize that these kids are now talking about you in class or are doing a project on you. And when I asked Sophia, what does she want to do when she grows up? She said, I want to be president of the United States. And I thought, yes, quite frankly, I hadn't said that when I was her age in 5th grade. I hadn't thought that. So we have made that generational leap that she said that. And I'm guessing, Christian, they could be competing against each other. I think you're in the same grade. Who knows? Or you could be running as a ticket.
I was just going to say that, right?
And so I think that's what's exciting.
Yep.
But we do have a ways to go still.
Yes, we do.
And so I think having a woman on the ballot, and I must say, when I won, and just reminding, I ran in a 7-way primary in my first race. I was the only woman. I won by 1%. Okay? And 1% mattered. 100,000 votes cast, 1,010 votes. And I believe I won because there were a lot of women very fired up about me running. And I also said I had a lot more girlfriends that were helping me out. And a very broad group of women that were saying and encouraging me. And that's why I do what I do, because she should run. Others should run.
Well, you started this panel by talking about, not seeing yourself represented in the programs that you watched, and I think that we're finally starting to change that for young women now. This is not Hillary's first time running for president. I grew up with, a huge political crush on her, and to see her go through as senator and secretary of state and to now really feel this palpable energy around her candidacy, I think it's very inspiring for young women. And the way we end up with women candidates for president is that we get women in the pipeline, starting at student government, but into local government, into federal politics and government. And that is really how we start building that pipeline. And I think that's for me the most exciting thing about all of this. And what you said about the sisterhood is totally true. I was the first woman elected to the seat that I hold. There has never been a Ward 1 council member that is a woman, and that was huge. And also, the first organization to endorse me was the Women's Campaign Fund. And all of of that stuff matters. It really does, because it gives you credibility. And I think that what will happen from this campaign cycle to have 2 women candidates running for president is that we will see a lot more young women inspired and thinking about themselves in the White House.
Excellent. So I can't believe our time is almost up. I have 2 questions that I want to get to, and this one I'll make it brief. Oftentimes when we talk to women about their roles in leadership, whether that is as CEO or as Congresswoman or Councilwoman, we often talk about what you've given up and what you have to balance. But I want to ask you, what have you gained from being in office?
You want to go first?
I'll do this one if you like. Well, I have gained confidence, I think. When I first started out, and this is also my first time being a legislator, and I'm not an attorney, so I have that additional bar. And, you know, my biggest fear coming into this office is that we would have so many things that we wanted to do that we wouldn't get anything done. And in wrapping up my first year, I am so thrilled to report that, you know, we didn't get every single thing done, but we got so much more than I ever thought we would. And we're just building on that momentum. And so to look back on that and then to look out into the community and to talk with people and to have them say to me, you're actually making a difference, that has been the most tremendous thing. I think I've really gained a deeper sense of my own ability to accomplish things on behalf of others. And that energizes me to do more.
Excellent. What have you gained?
I would say I've gained an even greater appreciation for what my role is in helping spread the message, quite frankly, about girls and women running for office. And I didn't jump into this to be the woman that carried the torch. That's not why I jumped in. But once I did get elected and I realized how kind of hungry women and girls were, you know, for the message and for the encouragement and for the support, that's when I realized I needed to, you know, I gained the knowledge that I needed to help be that voice. And so we're doing that, and what I appreciate the message here is, but the message can't just go to girls and women. It has to go to men and boys, and we have to start younger, because these elections are not won, you know, by just women supporting other women. We have to, you know, make it an entire, you know, society movement. And I also think the other thing that I've gained is I've gained just a far better understanding of how women can advance this country. And how I've always known that. I've been an attorney. I've been in practice 30 years. I practice primarily in a male-dominated area of law enforcement and criminal justice field. But I have to tell you, women, we have incredible voices of the female members, Republican and Democrat, that I've met in the United States House of Representatives, add such richness to the discussion and to the voice of this country. Whether or not it's, you know, Cynthia Lummis in Wyoming or Tulsi Gabbard in Hawaii, myself in Indiana, we have such deep friendships, quite frankly, between the women in Congress. And we actually often support each other. And I wasn't expecting that as much as we've done. And so I have a new level of sisterhood across the country from both parties. And it's been great.
I love it.
Can I add one quick thing?
Yes.
So we often talk about how important it is to have women at the table. And I think it's important for us to also talk about the specific things and how that really does make a difference. And we're not just saying that over and over again. Just a couple weeks ago, I convened a hearing on street harassment in the District of Columbia. It was only the third time anyone in this country had convened a hearing like that. And what was shocking to me and so many of the women who came out to testify about their experiences was that the men had no idea, because we hadn't really told them. It was just something we were living with. And there are so many things like that we experience it as women that men do not. And us being at the table and bringing those experiences and giving voice to them is what will change the world. And I just want to make sure that we always keep that in mind about that, the importance of that.
Absolutely. She should run, and we should talk about all these issues. I know. I have 1 minute left, and I'm determined to get this question in because it's from somebody out there who's watching on live stream. So we'll keep our advice short, but this is really interesting because this is about the ripping of the Band-Aid. This is the real stuff, the real questions. So this question came in for you guys tonight. This woman says, I keep telling my mom that she needs to run for our local school board. She's put 4 kids through our district schools. She's been an advocate for my sister with special needs and a regular substitute teacher for many years. She's beloved by teachers and principals and district staff alike, but when I bring it up, she laughs. And she tells me that she's just a stay-at-home mom with a 20-year-old resume. Any advice for getting her to consider the possibility to run? What should my next piece of advice be? So if you were talking to her directly, I would just love to hear what you would tell her mom.
Well, when I was approached about running, and I was approached about running, I didn't think of it on my own. Someone asked me to run. They actually started a little campaign where a few people called me. And so it wasn't just one person, because it quite frankly took more than one person for me to really believe that A, I should jump in, and B, that I could win. And so I would say to that person that she should think about who are those influencers of her mom besides her, but it's so important to have your family there because they are a part of the journey. And if they're not in, it's tougher. Okay. So she's got her top cheerleader there with her, but getting other levels of influence on that mom to run, whether it's a teacher, whether it's someone else from the school system, whether it is one of her best friends. Go to one of her best friends who will be there for her when it's tough times when you're running. And then someone unexpected, someone that she wouldn't expect to be there for her. And that's how I would do it. Build the team and convince her.
Excellent.
I've had this conversation with my mom, and she does laugh. And it goes something like this. Mom, you're so passionate about what you do, and you have such a good perspective, so much experience, so much knowledge in all of the things that you've tackled in your life. Can you imagine how different our government, our community could be if you brought those perspectives to elected office?
You hear that out there? Good job. Good
She
advice.
should run.
Yeah, she should run.
She should run.
And she should hashtag find a way. All right. Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you, Councilwoman, so much.